Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Mike for MOBOXgraphics.com, and we're back with another micro interaction video. This time it's going to be this poor girl. She's just making a phone call and she just will not stop calling, but we're not picking up. Basically, it's like this artificial dialer app where somebody's calling you. It's really simple. There's really not a lot of motion. The big motion element will be the little button on the bottom that moves. So you could tell me what you think in the comments down below, but let's just go ahead and jump right in. So we're in here in After Effects, and I already have a composition made. It's 1600 by 1200 at 50 frames per second, and I'm gonna name this Microinteraction 004. And it's 10 seconds long, by the way. So I already brought some icon elements in here that I'm gonna use, as well as this photograph. All of these were downloaded for free. So the icons were downloaded from Material Icons. This is a Google Material Design Icons database. When you download these, you download them in SVG, but After Effects can't use SVG files. So you have to first open them up in Adobe Illustrator and then save them as an Adobe Illustrator file, and then you could bring them into After Effects. So that's what we have to do there. And then this photo, which was taken on a Google Pixel 2 in, I don't know where this is, but this is where it was taken. This is the photo, and we're using this. This is not my photo. So to start out, we're going to, oh, and by the way, these are kind of named, but they're not named right, so I'm just gonna name these. Photo, phone icon, and then the rest kind of don't really matter, but maybe this one does. But the rest here don't really matter. So let's start by making the outline of the device. So we're going to create, again, a rounded rectangle. And I'm gonna kind of try to keep it like a 2:1 aspect ratio. That's what the rage is today with all the kids. I'm gonna center up the anchor point, press Y on the keyboard, just drag it to the center, and then center this up within the composition. So it snapped into the center because I actually have a white solid as the background, but I'm gonna go ahead and lock that background layer so I don't accidentally grab it. So I'm just gonna round these corners a little bit by just opening up the contents, rectangle path, and just increase the roundness a little bit. And I'm just gonna start placing the icons, but first I should probably make this white and add a drop shadow so it stands out. So one technique I like to use with drop shadows is I like to have the distance set to 0. That's softness. The distance set to 0. Increase the softness a lot, decrease the opacity. So you get kind of a general aura, but then also add another drop shadow. Set the direction to 180, which means it's directly straight down, and increase the softness and decrease the opacity. So it almost looks like there is kind of a light shining from the top, and so you kind of get a little bit of shadow, but it's also like it's like a piece of paper on a table. I think I'm going to increase the softness just a little bit more, and maybe the distance. Yeah, so that looks fine. Could mess with that later if you'd like, but I'm just going to rename this outline, spelling it right, putting it at the bottom, and locking this layer also. Okay, so let's start moving the icons to where we think we want them to be. So to help me out here, I'm gonna open up a grid, and this grid will help me make sure I kind of have an even icon layout. So the menu button can go up here, maybe about right there. The back icon, I want to be parallel to it, so I'm just going to drag it, and that is 1, 2, 3 blocks over. 1, 2, 3. So it's about right there. I think they could actually move down just a little bit, maybe to about there. The dialer or the phone icon will go at the bottom in the center, as well as the dialer icon. And then these can just go wherever, wherever I want here. So I have them all matched up in the center. Let's see, let me just drag these away. So I make sure I'm actually lining them up in the center point. And then I'm just going to drag them over a few blocks. Doesn't really matter which order they're in. In my opinion, you can go and move them or do whatever you want. So that's kind of step one, just have the icons laid out. We're kind of around where you're going to want them to be. So for the photo, I'm just going to move it about there, and I'm going to create a mask for it. So I'm just going to, I guess there's two ways I can make a mask. The first one, I can just add a mask. Let's go ahead and try that first, though I suspect I will run into some problems. So let's see if I can't make a perfect mask. Okay, so I think I might have nailed it, actually. Of course, now I can't move my mask. Let me see if I can't move it. You know what? I think that that's masked out pretty well. Let me check my reference image. Yeah, I would say it's masked out pretty well. Yeah, so I guess I can do it again if I'd like, if I want to. That's getting the full image. Okay, so I like that. And I'm just gonna center up the anchor point to the center of the mask, press Y on the keyboard and just move it to the center. So the center of the mask is not quite the center of the composition. So let me go ahead and just make the background invisible. I'm just gonna make actually everything invisible because it's snapping to those objects and I don't want it to. So there it goes, it just snapped to the center. I'm gonna make them visible again. And now I'm just going to move this to the center because again, it was just barely off center. Okay. So let's see, what should I do now? I'm just gonna make all of these icons transparent because they're not really the highlight here. So I'm gonna just press T on the keyboard and decrease the opacity to maybe 50%. And I think that that's about appropriate. And what else do I need? Let's see, move these all down by selecting them all and just pressing Shift. Not pressing Shift. Start moving them and then press Shift and then it locks on that pane. But I'm also gonna add like a name and a phone number here. Let's see. Oh, I'm just coming up with some girl name. And then a random phone number. That looks too unrandom for some reason. I'm telling you this is completely random. And then I'm just going to increase the size of the name, add a bold to it. Maybe reduce the size of the mobile phone number. And then I'm going to shift it up. Just like that. So that, move that to the center anchor point. Kind of center it up a little bit. And I think I'm going to further reduce the size of the phone number. And it was too close to being even without actually being even, which it's like you either have to be like totally matching or not matching at all, in my opinion. Okay, so just moving those up. I think all of our icon elements are in place. The last thing now is to add a circle for the ringer. So for the color, I'm gonna choose like a green color. Definitely a little bit more towards the yellow spectrum. And I'm going to put that underneath the phone icon. Center up the anchor point. And then center up the anchor point on the icon. So the icon is black and I'm not really digging that too much. Whoa, for some reason that anchor point does not look centered. I'm just gonna use my tool. Yeah, it was just not quite centered. Things get stuck all the time. So I highly recommend you download some form of tool to center up anchor points or move anchor points, it really will save you just a ton of time. There are free ones. This is from Motion. This is called Motion V2. You can get it at mountmograph.com. He's not sponsoring me. I'm not promoted. I paid for this, but it's totally worth it. And that's just one of the things that it offers. So I'm going to rename this to Ringer Circle. Sure. And I'm going to actually marry the phone icon to the Ringer Circle. So whenever I move the Ringer Circle, the phone icon moves with it, which is just what I want. Just going to close all these here. No need to see all that. And then I'm going to add a fill to that phone icon. Just searching fill and dropping it on the phone icon. And I'm just going to make it white. Okay, we're getting pretty close now. I think everything's done that I want to do. Maybe I would add some drop shadows. Remember, I like when my drop shadows are straight down. It seems like After Effects doesn't really like adding drop shadows to masked objects, which is a little unfortunate. I hope we don't run into some issues in the future. So I think that looks good. Yeah, it really does. It really hates the idea of adding a mask to that. Okay, so now we need this thing to vibrate and move up. So let's see. I'm going to create a layer new null object. Drag this to the bottom under the Ringer Circle. And while I'm here, I'm just going to move the photo up top. And I'm basically just layering these the way it actually looks. So we got the menu icons and the arrow. We have the photo. We have the name. We have a couple icons. And now we're towards the bottom. So I'm going to copy how Android does this. So I'm going to just replicate how Android's doing this. So for the inner circle, I'm going to give myself maybe 2 seconds ahead to add some animation, maybe in the beginning. So for the Ringer Circle, I'm going to press P on the keyboard and S on the keyboard and set keyframes for this. I'm going to come out to maybe 1 second and I'm going to drag this up about there. I think that that's actually a really good size. So I'm just going to move this keyframe over, maybe increase it slightly. But then I'm going to hit J on the keyboard to bounce back to my initial spot, and I'm just going to now reduce the size. So what you have is something like that. I think that's a little bit too much motion, maybe a little bit too much scaling. Let's see what this looks like now. Okay, and now I'm gonna just let's see. So it shoots up, and then I want it to come down. So I'm just gonna copy these keyframes, Control C, Control V. So now we have this coming up and then going down. I think maybe it comes down a little too fast. I'm just gonna drag that out. I'm actually just gonna match it up perfectly so it goes up and down at the same rate, but maybe happen a little bit faster. Okay, so now for the vibrating portion. I'm gonna search here for slider control, and I'm gonna add 2 slider controls to this null object. While I'm here, I'm gonna parent the Ringer Circle to the null. Now, if I hit P on the keyboard on the null, and I hold Alt and select the position stopwatch, I can add an expression. So I'm going to use a wiggle expression. So I'm just going to type wiggle, but then I'm going to pick whip these 2 elements. Select that one, hit comma, select the second one, close that out. And basically the first element in the wiggler is the speed, and the second one is the number of pixels in which it will move. So what this allows me to now do is set keyframes for the wiggler control in the expression. So I'm going to set keyframes for both of these. I don't think I'm going to actually change the speed, but I will change the value. So we'll just see. I set 2 just in case. So pressing U on the keyboard, I get all my keyframes. So I want the speed to be 50. And I want the number of keyframes to be 2.5, or the number of pixels. I'm going to press K on the keyboard to bounce to this point. And I already messed up. I actually want these keyframes to be there. If I bounce back to the other keyframes by hitting J, I'm going to set this to 0. Not both of them, just one of them. 0, which again, this is the number of pixels it'll wiggle. And then if I hit K twice, I'll now change that to 0. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so we're getting there. It does need a little bit of smoothing. So I'm just going to select these keyframes here, come to my graph editor, and start the process of making this happen a little bit faster. And you'll slowly realize that the graph editor blows. So you can sit here and mess with these all day, but I'm just gonna revert back by hitting Control Z, and I'm gonna use this plugin Motion Script V2, and I'll jump back here and show you what the graphs look like after I use the tool. So I'm just going to, this is a little bit easy easing, and this one is easy in. So let's see what that looks like. So I'm just going to move these in. I'm going to end up deleting that keyframe because I'm not going to use that. Press U on the keyboard so I just see those. And let's see, maybe I'll add the same amount of smoothing on the wiggler. Okay, so I think that looks good. And this is what the keyframes will look like. So you can just replicate that. I suck with the graph editor. I've become very reliant on this tool, which is not good. But what we have there is the appearance of something ringing. So now all we need to do is just copy and clone these keyframes. So I'm gonna again use this tool by hitting clone. Otherwise, there are other free cloner plugins, but you can't just copy, hit Control C and Control V because it actually pastes the full layer. You'd have to grab these layer by layer, Control C, Control V, and then grab these Control C and Control V. Okay, so I'm gonna use the cloner just so I know that I'm doing this absolutely correct. The keyframes I know will be lined up. Okay, so this should bounce up and vibrate twice. Okay, it doesn't drop, and the reason is that I did not add the second one, the start position. So I'm going to again use my clone tool. But you'll notice that I made this keyframe setup a little bit longer. And the reason is that I'm going to have this kind of change colors and the icon change a little bit. So I'm just going to start out by just getting my color here, and I'm just going to copy this value because I want, when you add a fill to a layer, it just makes it red, but I don't want that. I want this color. So I'm just going to copy that color profile, and I'm going to add a fill to the ringer circle, and I'm going to add pull the drop shadow beneath the fill. That way the drop shadow doesn't get filled either. And I'm just going to hit Control V I'm going to get my color back. So if I hit J on the keyboard and set a keyframe for the color, and then K on the keyboard, I'm going to have the color turn to red, as if the call was missed. Just like that. And then if I hit U on the keyboard, I could add the same smoothing to the color, which will look like that on your graph editor. And furthermore, if I hit J on the keyboard, I'm going to have this icon rotate. So if I hit R on the keyboard, I want the icon to start at like a negative 140, I think is probably good. Set a keyframe, hit K on the keyboard, and set it back to 0. And again, add my smoothing with my external plugin. So that's what it's going to look like. Let's take a look at the full thing. Okay, I think that this would actually look better if it was faster, like significantly faster. Let's take a look. So I think that looks good. We are running a little bit out of time in terms of our timeline. I don't want this to get too long because then I can't make this into a GIF. So let's just... So I'm kind of wondering if I really need smoothing on the vibrating portion. I think it did look better, so I'm just going to hit Control Z until I get that back. Okay. So I guess we're going to have to add a start and end position, and man, we really cut this short in terms of how much time we have in between. Okay, so we'll have about 2 seconds in the beginning to create something and about 2 seconds at the end to end it. Okay, so let's do this. We are going to have the photo scale and have a transparency. So S on the keyboard and then T on the keyboard pulls up your properties. And I'm going to have this shift in scale to 0, the transparency of 0. Just like that. So we'll obviously change the speed later, but I'm just going to set these keyframes. I'm going to have this stuff down here, these icons fall down and go transparent. So I'm just going to actually just select all of them, hit T on the keyboard, set transparency keyframes, hit K on the keyboard, set these to 0, hit J on the keyboard, come back and hit P on the keyboard, set keyframes, and then K on the keyboard, and maybe move these things just down. Whether we want to change the timing on them, we can figure that out. Let's see, this one, I think we're probably fine. I'm just gonna again add the same smoothing factor. Oh no, and I reset it somehow. Okay, well I hope that... Ooh, if I hit U on the keyboard, I get all my keyframes back. That's one thing you gotta be careful about that tool, is that if you don't select your keyframes because they're hidden, then you won't be able to actually see what if you're doing it right. So let's see, I think I'm gonna have the name come down even more. I'm gonna make the transparency happen a little bit sooner. Yeah, I like when the transparency is sooner. So I'm just gonna select all of these transparency keyframes, move them over, and make sure I move all these icons down also. Now if I actually stagger these, I'm just selecting these keyframes and shifting them over a tad, you might get a cool effect. And I actually think I did it backwards, so let me just bounce these back. Okay. So now I'm just going to move these keyframes over. And what I really want to do is mess with this icon. So I'm going to press T on the keyboard, set a transparency keyframe, P on the keyboard for position, and S on the keyboard for scale, and then U on the keyboard for all of my keyframes. I'm gonna come down here, and what I'd like to do is have this scale up, have the transparency drop significantly, and have this act as a dialer pad. So if I just now grab these and add the same smoothing effect, there's a lot of overlap that I'm not really in love with. But that'll do. That'll do, Charlie. That'll do. I don't know where that comes from, but and then of course I could just add numbers to this, which I'll probably just fast forward through me moving all of these numbers into place. Okay, so all the numbers are in, and we're gonna start getting real messy with the number of keyframes. So I'm just gonna save the project so I don't mess up. But basically, the transparency and the position and everything will move along with this dialer icon. So I'm just gonna hit J on the keyboard until I get to that keyframe, which is right there. So I'm actually going to set the transparency on this to 0. And then go to that keyframe and make it 100. And then I'm also going to attach all of these to the dialer icon and then add the smoothing element to the transparency. So what you're going to see here is that these numbers are going to appear as if they were on that icon the whole time. Just like that. Now we just need to get the beginning to start like this and end up like this. So what I could do is I could actually just clone all of these keyframes. Again, if you're not using the tool, you're gonna have to go layer by layer and copy and paste them. It's a total pain in the neck. Do yourself a favor and buy this tool or get a tool that has a cloning feature. I'll try to find some and put them in the link down in the description. I hope that I could find something for you guys, because that is so much faster than copy and pasting. But well, what I will need to do is actually reverse the keyframes, so time reverse keyframes. And so at least we're starting in this position, but you know, they're just not really perfect. So I'm gonna have to reset the keyframes and re-add the smoothing. You know what? I may be better off just redoing it all again, but that's okay. I'm just gonna redo these elements. I think the dialer and everything matches fine, but I will make this happen significantly quicker. Because when you get a phone call, you know, you don't want a laggy animation, right? So that's pops into place really super quick. So I'm just gonna hit U on the keyboard. I think those are done. Now it's just a matter of getting everything else in line. So first things first, I'm gonna have to copy these keyframes and clone them. Hit J on the keyboard, or sorry, K on the keyboard. And clone those. So now this icon now operates just like that. So I could actually probably move these over like this. So now this is just a matter of keyframe timing, but I think you know most of what we've done to this point. I'm just gonna hit S on the keyboard, set a keyframe, set this to 0, reset the keyframes, add some smoothing. To maintain my sanity, I'm gonna keep this dialer icon up, so at least I could line up these keyframes. And again, I'm just resetting these keyframes. I think for these, I'm gonna just have these simply scale. Start from 0, and then just stagger them. I think that'll be a simple yet adorable technique. Let's see. It's a little messy and the speed's a little off, but I think overall that looks pretty good. I'll just have to go through and kind of maybe increase the speed just a little bit just across the board. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm just gonna select all these layers and hit U on the keyboard so I can see all of them. And if I select them all and I hold Alt and drag this out, this extends the length proportionally for all the keyframes. So let's see if that helped. So I think that looks pretty good. I'm just gonna mess with the opacity a little bit. Okay, that looks good. So now when I zoom out, all I need to do now is just move all of these keyframes over. There, just line these up. And I know that's ultra small, so you probably can't see, so let me zoom that in. So I think that looks pretty awesome. If not, maybe a little bit slow here at the end. Pretty simple. Select all these, hold Alt, and just drag them in just a tad. Just until I feel like the speed is appropriate and not too slow. So I think that looks really good. I think that looks just really clean and smooth and professional. So anyways, guys, it's been quite a long tutorial, but I hope you did enjoy the video. If you did, please be sure to give this video a like, subscribe, and become a Patreon subscriber at the $3 level to download all project files. Sometimes we release them for $1 level supporters if I think that they're really good and it would be too tempting to keep them away. But for project files, you can always expect to get them if you are at the $3 tier 2 level. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching.